Welcome all to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible people and organizations that are doing good in the world. Today, I am your host, Josh Basile. I'm a C45 quadriplegic. I'm paralyzed below my shoulders. I am a disability rights advocate, lawyer that focuses my time and energy on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for persons with disabilities. I'm excited today to have with us Cam Beaudoin and the A11Y Coder. Incredible work, and welcome, Cam.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
So to begin, just tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, I started in my journey to accessibility through the tech stream. I've always been a little bit into tech and technology, and I was a developer before getting into this line of work. So that's what I've been focusing a lot on recently. I worked at IBM, and I was their accessibility practice lead. When I joined, they had a backlog in one of the projects they were working on of like 3,000, 4,000 accessibility defects. And they said, hey, great, this junior developer, he sure needs some work to do. So while I was waiting for logins to get into the systems, they said, well, go read the WCAG, which is funny because that's how a lot of professionals start, don't they? Here's the raw version of the guidelines and go to town. So I made it work, though. I burned through all those defects. I found the low-hanging fruit, started there, and worked my way through that, becoming the practice lead for the accessibility team of IBM Canada. And since then, I've just been on this journey, and that's really what I've been doing. Also advocating and doing public speaking and training on accessibility as well, and how to get developers and people in charge, strategists as well, and how do you make things, better for all users. So that's kind of where I am now. And now I actually run the A11Y Coder, and that's my business, and I do training and education.
And with the work with the A11Y, what does that look like right now?
So these days, I'm doing a lot of focus on, like I said, public speaking and training, but not just about accessibility. Because I think that our industry has a lot of really, really great advocates. Right? There's a lot of really great people out there who are, speaking and internally in their organizations, trying to get out and trying to push the needle forward for accessibility in their teams. But one thing I'm really trying to focus on now is I have a bit of a gift for gab. I love speaking. I love training. How do I get those professionals? How do I get those advocates, in and around that same level? How do I train them to then go forward and, make a bigger impact within their own organization? So that's something I'm really trying to do a lot of these days. And conferences that I go to about accessibility, I try to speak to the accessibility consultants, because one thing I've noticed is that a lot of really great and passionate people go unnoticed in these organizations and in their industries. And I think that's really too bad, because we've got some really great talent out there. We've got some really great knowledge out there as well, way more knowledge than even I do. And they're, banging their head against the wall, not able to actually get the right people in front of them or speak to the people in charge about making the change that they need to. So that's kind of what I'm doing a lot lately.
And unleashing that knowledge, that you guys are the subject matter experts, and then kind of connecting with the community and creating that synergy of teaming up together. That's always been I would love to see more of that. There's not enough
of that. No, there's never enough. And even if you go to some of these conferences, something that I keep seeing at conferences these days is we're still talking about things like alt text. And this is like the most basic of accessibility, things. Why are we still talking about that? We should be really trying to push that forward. That problem's, been solved in many different ways. We should be talking about advocacy and how do we go and speak to, CTOs about the problem of integration and stuff like that. These are the same conversations that, by the way, information security was having 10 years ago. I think that we have a very similar model as information security, and we should be kind of following them. We should be figuring out how they did it and try and copy the best parts of that and make it better. So that's, yeah.
And what I love about what you just said is that information technology at the C level, having that security is in the conversation at every major company. Yep. So what about accessibility?
Right.
Having a chief accessibility officer, having a chief inclusivity officer.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if we can create the right conversations and the right leadership to integrate accessibility, access, inclusion within the DNA of these
Exactly. Yep.
companies or within that
Yeah.
culture, that is when we're going to start seeing real change.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's a lot of our
And I,
approach, to be quite honest. It's a lot of the approach of these of advocates out there. They come in from a either you're going to get sued, like the danger zone kind of thing, or come at it from a very technical point of view. And I'll let your listeners know a little tidbit of what I've found works really well for me is to make a PowerPoint presentation accessible. Because I guarantee you, every C-level executive out there knows what PowerPoint is and how to use it. And if you don't know how to make a PowerPoint presentation accessible, well, then you're also not in the right conversation either. So I think that's something that we need to learn how to do is communicate ideas in a way that's able to be received by these by whomever in a way that they understand as well. Because a senior level executive doesn't always understand what an ARIA label is. They don't know. They don't know. Especially as someone who comes from a business background. But I guarantee you, if you showed them a PowerPoint presentation with colors that were all out of whack, that they couldn't understand the data behind it, you're going to get someone who understands a little bit more about what you're trying to say.
well, providing those teaching moments to even put it on their
Yeah,
radar, that's having the right team members there to be able to show that. And then as you do it more often, it just becomes second
yep,
nature.
yep,
It's just, part of, you know, building a PowerPoint. You have to
exactly.
do it this way instead of the old way of doing it.
Yep,
So I love that. And so just to make sure everybody knows your role within A11Y Coder, what
I
is
run it.
that?
I own the A11Y Coder, and I started it thinking that I would be doing a lot more development, seeing as the coder part, or consulting more towards testers and the development team. But the demand and my passion really about training and educating has really turned this into a more tilted towards the technical folks. But I've spoken to designers and strategists, project managers, everyone else who's kind of surrounds that whole technical aspect. And how do I communicate those ideas, technical ideas, sometimes very technical ideas, in a way that they understand as well? Because another thing, I know a lot of creative folks out there, UX UI designers, who've never seen a line of code. They don't even know what ARIA means. So have we gone and actually explained to them what ARIA is, right? Accessible Rich Internet Applications, for those who are don't know the acronym. And I just got off a presentation last week about that, and they were thanking me because they've always heard people and developers say ARIA this, ARIA that, but no one's ever showed them what it actually does. So that's a lot of what I do. I run and own the accessibility coder and do lots of training.
Well, you're teaching, you're educating, you're getting people on a better page
Mm-hmm.
to be able to move forward into the future. So I love it. And all right, so I love stories. I don't know if you have a good one around this question I'm about to
Yeah.
ask, but within your career, what achievement are you most proud of, or what story can you tell us around a fun achievement?
Yeah. So I actually have a couple of stories about that. And the achievements that I seem to be gravitating towards whenever I get asked that question are examples of other stories. I've been doing a lot of research lately on, how do we communicate ideas, of course, part of what I'm doing. And this is something I came up with. And in Canada, here, I'll tell you this story. I came up with this. I haven't heard anyone else give this story, but in Canada, unless you have it in the US, we have, well, a lot of people call it funny money because it's all different colors, but that's irrelevant to you if you're visually impaired, right? If you can't see or things like that. And a lot of my clients are in the financial sector. So when I go to them and I start talking to them about, it's all well and good, but in 2001, Bank of Canada made a big change in the way that they do business. And they said, okay, well, it's that. And I used to do this in person a lot before COVID. I would actually go and ask somebody in the crowd for some money, and they would then, give me a bill, and I would say, well, our Canadian money has tactile features on it right up here. It's got Braille on it. And I'm not sure if you have that in the US. I know it's been brought to other countries. I think your $10 bill may be coming out with it. But
I've never
never
heard
heard of that, yeah?
of our money.
Because in Canada and the US, all of our bills are the same size. So imagine that. Imagine that if you were not able to determine what bill you had in front of you or holding it. And if you try to take a picture of it, I know there's apps out there that can identify bills for you. I think in the US that's quite popular for people who are visually impaired. They take a picture of a bill, or they have a sliding kind of tool. But in Canada, we've eliminated that altogether because one small process change, one small change in the printing process was able to add these tactile features onto the bills, and then everyone can identify it. So I thought it was pretty neat.
And this makes so much sense. And I remember, I think it was the Ray Charles movie with Jamie Foxx. How he wanted to be paid in ones because he never knew what if he was getting big bills or little
Right,
bills.
right.
At least if you get the little bills,
Yeah,
that's
you
that.
know
So
that exactly right. And of course, there's all those sad stories of people getting shortchanged. But I had someone come up to me recently, and going back to your question about a proudest achievement, and he came up to me recently as an old client, and he said, Cam, you're one of the only people who's ever made me think on an emotional level about accessibility, and it's probably because we do such a piss ass job about accessibility from the start. And it was those little wins that you get, because if you can convince one person, if you can talk to one person and they carry that through their career, not just that job, not just that company, but they carry it through their career about caring about people with disabilities. And I think that those little wins start to add up and give you the warm and fuzzies inside. So as achievements, that's a really big one.
well, being able to bring that
Yeah,
emotion into it makes it real, and it makes it memorable, and it allows you to store it in that long
that's
term
right.
memory. Because
Absolutely.
you know,
We are creatures of story. That's what we are. Isn't that how we learn from the beginning, right? We learn from stories and fairy tales and things like that. And we forget that as adults. We just want to have data, right? Especially these days. Just show me the data, but data doesn't translate very well. You don't remember data. You don't remember that. That's much better as a
and
handoff.
too often accessibility doesn't matter to a person until someone they love
Yep.
or know is deeply impacted by it. But in all reality, it's every single person eventually gets touched
Mm-hmm.
by
Mm-hmm.
disability. It would be cool. I don't know if cool is not the right word. It'd be great if, early on, we could find ways of communicating
Mm-hmm.
so it doesn't have to be such a direct impact of like your best friend becomes
Right.
disabled or your loved
Right.
one. I don't wish that upon anybody, but at the same time, when those events do happen, it changes
Yep.
perspective. It makes it so much realer
Yep.
about
Yep.
how do
Absolutely.
we allow content to be accessible? How do we allow someone to navigate and have the same opportunities as someone
Mm-hmm.
else without a disability? It's creating those creating that touch and impact. There's different ways of doing it. I feel like you've found creative ways to get into people's
Yeah.
minds and hearts. So that's awesome with that
Yeah.
achievement. And then I would love to know, what does web accessibility really mean to you?
So going back to that story about, I got put on a banking or financial institution project when my first big job as a developer back at IBM. And in that project, that was, I saw what it was like. So going back to the money, that was the time that I found the story about the money touched and really resonated with people. And that made me really parallel it with, well, the Bank of Canada can do this with money. Well, why can't we do this with forms? Because all you're doing is building forms at banks. Really, if you're a developer at a bank, not trying to talk down to them, but I mean, really, it's forms all day long, right? We're applying for mortgages, we're applying for bank accounts, we're transferring money. It's a lot of form interaction, things like that. So, in terms of web accessibility, really, that kind of is something that really a lot of people can understand. That idea of finances. If I got money in my wallet, like that's what, to me, being able to live a life no matter what your abilities are, and trust that you can go and pay for coffee, right? Isn't that like just the most basic thing of our day and age, right? I want to be able to go out and use my to go buy Tim Hortons in Canada, a Starbucks in the US. We have Starbucks here too, but if that doesn't even work on my phone, or if I can't recharge my account, like how frustrating is that? I experience that all the time. I was just trying to apply for insurance today, and one of the drop downs had no values in it. It was the most ridiculous thing. I tried to hit submit, and the drop down like it said, please enter some data here, but there was no data to be in the drop down. And I was like, this is this is the experience that people have all the time across the web. So fixing that kind of stuff, the most basic frustrations would just go away if we start to work on that. So that's kind of a big example of what it means to me.
That's awesome. And so, unfortunately, the internet is not as accessible as most people think it is. Less than 2% meet accessibility guidelines and standards. I'm so curious from your perspective and your background, what do you think we can do to improve kind of that web accessibility gap to like really make the internet more accessible, or at least to have those conversations to put that on people's radar?
Yeah. I think we really have to start leveraging tooling a lot more, like, because a lot of those low hanging fruit can actually be already solved by tools. Whether it's CI pipeline, continuous integration pipeline. You can go and put tooling in there to catch a lot of those issues. You can put on the front end. You can get developers have their their software. You can make sure that when they're building something, it can give code examples. There's lots of ways, but I think we need to leverage that tooling a lot more. I know a lot of enterprise level clients are so hesitant about putting anything in because the procurement process there's so much red tape in procurement. Like it's nuts. Trying to get a simple change in that pipeline to go and integrate with any tool that will just audit a page and reject. So in software development, you can push code. You push code to a library, right? And just getting that would be a perfect time, a perfect step to just check for accessibility on all projects everywhere. Yet I see that in so few clients. And it's unfortunate because their procurement process, there's not enough people, again, who are knowledgeable about accessibility in those roles, in that DevOps type of role, the people who control that pipeline, who can set up and establish tooling in that pipeline. There are not enough people there. So we're reliant on external tools, things like browser plugins. We're also reliant on automated overlay companies. We're also reliant on, like I said, developer tools inside there. And I think there's a space for all that. I think there's a space for all those types of tools. But man, if we could just get that process a little bit further back, that would be a big help. I think that's the biggest hurdle right now in web accessibility and technology.
I love that. Tools are good, especially when you're able to put them to use. And I know you speak with lots of businesses that they come to you for advice and help. And so, like, if you had one big message to send to a business of why accessibility and usability on the web matters, what is that message?
Now, hire me. No, I'm joking. That's the big. No, I'm joking.
It'd be better off for that.
Well,
right?
but on that note, I mean, it has to be a multi-pronged approach, right? It doesn't have to be the tools and the knowledge, because just like a self-driving car, right? We're not at the point yet where we can just press a button and cars drive themselves. I don't think we'll ever be there. We may get 99% there, but there will be a time where everything is self-driving, but you still need the person to be able to press stop at some point or know the rules of the road. I mean, there's no way that we're going to stop teaching people how to drive, right? That's never going to go away. So all of that has to come forward all at once. But if there's like a single message, I would say there's business reasons to making things accessible too, isn't there? It's such a growing market. We should be following people who have a lot more knowledge of that than us. Look at the big tech companies, right? Microsoft is putting huge amounts of money towards accessibility all over. Automated tooling and PowerPoint, right? I gave PowerPoint an example. PowerPoint finds alt text automatically. And if they're doing it, why aren't we doing it? They're putting accessibility checkers and they're hiring people with disabilities. This is all like, we should be looking at big companies that are already doing this. And if you don't have the budget for it, what can you do within your budget? Your budget's not zero. We know your budget's not zero because you're running a business. What's within your budget that you can do? Is it small changes? Is it tweaks? Is it changing the developers that you hire? Maybe you're hiring a third party to build whatever app. Could you maybe find one that knows what the web content accessibility guidelines are? I mean, it's just a simple question. You're putting them through the rings anyway to hire them. You may as well just quiz them on a few more things about accessibility, because if that matters, I mean, if your company is going to get a demand letter regarding that, well, you better protect yourself. You better make sure that the people you hire have the knowledge and the know-how of how to build stuff accessibly. So I would say there's lots of reasons, but yeah, maybe I've given you enough.
The business reasons should speak should touch the businesses.
Yeah.
And oftentimes people don't think that that there's much buying power within the disability community, but the truth is it's probably one of the largest brand loyal communities in the world.
Absolutely.
Like,
And one of the most vocal,
myself,
right? About something that doesn't work too. I remember, and it's not only the, let's put an example, right? I mean, if I had a brother who was blind, right? And if I knew that a bank did not work for him, why would I go and bank at that bank, right? I mean, I use financial institutions too much. Let's change that. Let's change it to, I don't know, home renovation business. If I knew a home renovation company didn't have an accessible site and he was trying to fix something, it didn't work, like, why would I go and give them my business? That just makes no sense. I wouldn't. I mean, it's just how it is, right? So that idea of the buying power is just, no one thinks enough about that, the 3 or 4 layers past just the immediate person with disabilities. We know that there's a big problem right now, right, in North America about employment with people with disabilities as well, right? That's a huge thing. But we're not thinking about the secondary or tertiary markets that are being touched on by people with disabilities either, right?
And with that buying power comes repeat customers.
Exactly.
And time again, when you're treated right, you go back to it because that was a good experience.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then last question of the day. I would love to know if you could speak to anybody in the world, who would it be and what would that conversation be about?
I've thought about this a lot. You gave me a lot to think about when I was thinking about this question. And, I think the Prime Minister of Canada would be a really good, Mr. Trudeau, because I would love to hear what he thinks about this, him as being a liberal, and how can we start to push this even forward? In Canada, we have the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and there's AODA for those who are more familiar with the acronym. And there are some very powerful and strong lawyers who have pushed this forward. And actually, there's actually just one, and he's phenomenal. Maybe I can send you some YouTube videos of how he speaks. But he's done things like his name is David Lepoff, by the way, and I actually did speak with him. He was really interesting to speak with at one of the conferences up here, and he pushed things like having the stop announced on public transit. You know that? So in Canada, I'm not sure everywhere in Canada. I know in Toronto here in the TTC, he pushed for the TTC to announce where the stop is. The next stop is going to be audibly. And that's huge. So how can that go beyond just AODA? Just because I still meet companies now that say, why do we have to follow AODA? Why do we have to follow this law? It's only in Ontario. And of course, if you do business in Ontario, you should follow it, right? But, someone in the other provinces, they maybe not be following it to the extent that they should be. So at what point, when can we get the Accessible Canada Act really have some teeth? When does that start to, and if there's one thing, my neighbors to the south in the US, right? You have a more litigious society, everyone's suing people on this and that. And I think that pushes the needle. It really forces companies to make change. Up here, I think there's a little bit less of that. And I would like to see some laws with more teeth. I think I could do that if I got an audience with the Prime Minister.
I love it. Well, let's try to find a way to set that up. I think that would be a great and important conversation to have. Well, Cam, thank you so much today for joining me and sharing your wisdom, your voice, and it's I love what you're saying and what you're doing. So thanks,
Josh. Appreciate it. Love to be here.